Welcome to Flame On. I am Brian. I am here today as part of our Rainbow Spotlight. Totally didn't make that up. That's all on Pat. That's it. That's his contribution to this. But I like it. It works. I'm here with the fantastic and incredibly talented William O. Tyler. Welcome to Flame On, William.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I want to know what's the Rainbow Spotlight? What's that all about?
So Flame On, and this is good for anybody. This Gay and Geeky podcast, been doing it for like over a decade at this point. A long time ago, I was like so into trying to get to different creators and do like spotlights, all this stuff. And then we got into pop culture. And let me just tell you, if you're a podcaster or a video streamer or whatever, and pop culture, it can pull you down into a gravitational well.
Yeah.
So any little side projects you might want to do, like it can tend to like take over everything, right? And I know, Will, you do a stream, Cinephilia, which we'll talk about. So I'm curious if this is consistent with your experience too. But long story short, we went away from that completely, and now I'm finally, after COVID and all this nonsense, I'm dialing it back. This is what the show always was intended. Let's talk to queer and ally creators, personalities, anybody, authors. I mean, we've had a great mix of people. We had a drag queen on recently who is a Twitch streamer, gamer. I mean, like, anyway, so Rainbow Spotlight, rainbow for the queer spectrum, all colors, everyone.
That's awesome. I love that.
And
sorry,
so I
just want to say real quick, my cat is yelling, so sorry if that interrupts the broadcast.
We never let a good pussy interrupt us. So I don't know if you know this, but we've met before in person. And I'm going to throw this out at you and see if it jogs anything.
Okay.
So, San Diego Comic-Con 2017.
Oh, that's way back.
Right.
I mean, my memory is like, whoop. So we'll see.
There was a Fox TV show. I think it was like an X-Men knockoff. What was it called? Oh man, it had.
It was animated?
No. It's not an official X-Men show, but it was like kind of. Actually, wait, no. It was. I think tied into the X-Men universe. It was that. Anyway, doesn't matter. Whatever the show is called, they did a party during Comic-Con at a bar in San Diego in the Gas Lamp. That they like converted the bar into the experience from the show. Is this ringing a bell? You're like, what? No,
I'm not a very social person either. So it's like,
I don't even think you were going. I don't even think you were going to the party. I think it was one of those things where, because were you in San Diego for the Comic-Con that year?
Yeah, I definitely. I'm always at Comic-Con, so yeah, I was definitely there.
I'll find a picture and send it to you. You had on a really cool shirt. And we ran into each other in the, it was in the elevator going down. Anyway, and I think both of us, I forgot, I don't remember what shirt I had on, but we both acknowledged each other's cool shirts. And forgot about this for years. And then I was going through talking to people. Anyway, I've been doing this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so random and weird.
I don't remember that.
Nah, listen, don't worry about it. It was just something I've in the back of my head. I've been like, yeah, that's right.
I'm sorry.
No.
Do you remember what the shirt was?
I'll pull up the picture at some point, and I can tell you.
Did we take a picture together?
Yeah, we did. That's
cool.
The thing. We took a picture together. Yeah. So that's past this prologue. Whatever. So, and that was, like I said, just random happenstance. But then years later, I got this book. I'm going to pull out my stack here. Fearful Hunter. And I got this from Northwest Press.
Yeah.
And I put it on my shelf. I'll be honest. I got it and I put it on my shelf. And I was like, I'll get to it at some point.
That's kind of what happens with big books. I know how that goes.
TLDR, right? Well, what I didn't realize, I mean, I love it. First of all, John Macy, if you have not seen this, I know we've talked about on the show before, Fearful Hunter with John Macy is it's a love letter to like kind of the druidic kind of spirit of the forest mythology, but very sexy. I won't call it like it's erotica, but it's very minimal, like sexy time, but beautiful and sexy draw. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir here, right?
Very sexy, but it's very character driven.
Yes. Oh yeah. And the characters are fascinating. It's beautiful. But so yeah, I was going through it and I'm like, wait a minute, what is this little 2-pager here by a William O. Tyler?
Yep.
And it's delightful because it's just a very straightforward, no dialogue, uh, and it's about, I guess, a hunter who is approached by a fawn of sorts. Is he a fawn or a satyr? I guess it's kind of
He's
fawn.
like he's a fawn. He's half deer, half human.
Okay.
So that story came about because John Macy and I are long friends, and we wanted to collaborate on something for a long time. Like we started out collaborating on various things. At one point, Fearful Hunter was going to be in full color, and I actually colored a couple pages as a sample for it, and didn't go through with that. And then at one point, John Macy was doing was collaborating with Zan of Northwest Press on a webcomic, and I was also going to color that. So there were a lot of like we almost did this together kind of instances. So when it got to the point that John Macy had done all three of the Fearful Hunter books and wanted to collect them into a full collection, he asked a couple of people, not random, but a couple of his friend artists to do backup stories, and I was honored to be asked to do one. And we kind of collaborated on that idea of having a half deer boy kind of like entice a hunter into doing something else instead of hunting.
Well, and what's nice is Fearful Hunter is a kind of dark, heavy story at times. It's not light fare at all. But your piece and then a couple of the other pieces at the end are kind of a nice like not palate cleanser. I don't want to say it like that, but aperitif, if you will, to follow that heavy meal with this delightful other little story. So I realized then I was like, oh my god, I didn't know you did this. And then of course I've also been revisiting some of these in the quarantine. Hard to Swallow, which again, random connections. Your boyfriend, right, Dave Davenport, was working with Justin Hall, and Justin and I were talking about this when I had him on the show. And then I go on Facebook and I'm like, hunting you down or whatever, and I'm like, oh my god, are you kidding me? That is so funny. And then of course I find your pieces in here, or piece, I think it's just was it, and this book. It was just this pinup, right? Which sexy as hell, right? I love a little back fur. I'll be quite honest. I'm guessing you do too.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I had to include that. It's part of what makes it hot.
Yes. And you'd also I think you've done a couple like kind of werewolf transformative sort of stories and pieces, right? I can't off the top of my head remember the next one, but is that a theme you come back to a lot?
That's it. That's the Dave Davenport theme. Dave Davenport has the werewolf stuff, and I think I've been by association. I'm now with the werewolf stuff because I also did a piece for another book of his, which is all about. He's got the story where there's some puppy play going on, and so I did a piece that's all about one of the guys buying his puppy from a puppy adoption, sidewalk adoption type thing. But that was another one for Dave. So
that's interesting, and I want to come back to that how partners can influence each other, because I think there's definitely a thing there, right? But before we do, I do want to acknowledge we've got our buddy James Figueredo in the chat. Greetings, James. Good to see you. And no, it wasn't Mutant X, and it'll hit me later. It was like Existence, or it's one of those. I don't know. It does not matter at all to the story. Just there was that show that was ultimately not great. Anyway, so let's. So I've shown some of your work. I've got some more stuff I want to talk about. But tell me how you got involved in cartooning and coloring, and then maybe how you started to find your way into queer stories and queer cartooning.
Well, it's interesting that you put it that way, because that's exactly how it happened. My earliest work was not very queer. the first book that I put out was The Goth Queen Needs a Mate, just like a one shot issue about this heterosexual white couple where the guy in the couple dies and the woman goes into this grief and mourning and awakens gargoyles that go out and find body parts for her to have a new mate. So the horror and the love and death and all that aspect has always been there. But for some reason, why is this queer Black creator creating this story about these, white heterosexual, this white heterosexual couple? So yeah, it's interesting that you put it that way. I think that I got into cartooning and making comics first of all because of film, which is a very random segue into it. But I went to school for film and film criticism, and I wanted to make movies. Initially, my idea was to make movies, and I started to storyboard my movies, and the storyboardings ended up becoming comics. And I think that first book, The Goth Queen Needs a Mate, was very much influenced by pop culture and media and what I thought that people wanted to see. And I wanted to tell stories that I thought people would be receptive to. I at this point, I'm like, I don't know if I can curse on the show or not.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I drop F-bomb all the time. At this point, I'm like, fuck that. I just want to create authentic stories that I love, that I would want to see. And I feel like it's become a much more joyful experience since creating that way.
I mean, so. I feel like that's a lot of people's journey. Like you want to find that thing that'll sell, but if your heart's not in it, and then it frustrates you because it doesn't sell potentially more often for people than not.
I did not sell at all.
Yeah, and then you come back to that thing where you're like, I just want to write what I love. Like I just want to enjoy what I'm doing and be proud of it for itself. And then if it does well, it does well. So in terms of getting into queer comics, like what was your journey? Like how did you really? Who did you first talk to, or how did you fit into that space and kind of grow into that world?
Yeah, I think that for me it was definitely Prism Comics right off the bat. Having the story, even though it was heterosexual white couple, I was still a queer creator, and so Prism welcomed me because of that, even though the book wasn't exactly queer content. Although I will say that even with a heterosexual lead, a couple of the gargoyles in that story I did create as queer right from the beginning. So there is a little bit of queerness in the margins of that story, but still not enough to sell well. But it was being welcomed by Prism Comics that really pushed me more into the queer population within comics, the queer subgenre. Just being at Prism at all the conventions and meeting other queer creators who were telling their queer authentic stories. And I'm sitting there like, man, this book that I made is trash.
Oh.
So, and no one else did that to me. I mean, everyone was very welcoming. Everyone had positive feedback. But for me, for myself, I was just like, I want to be more open and tell my story as opposed to telling the story that I think someone might want to read. That's not what's rewarding about it. So yeah, definitely being with Prism and meeting all of the creators. That's where I met Dave Davenport. That's where I met John Macy. That's where I met Justin Hall through Prism. Zan, all of us. We would just always hang out at conventions, and it made my life all the more queer.
It kills me because I think I was going to some of those same shows and just didn't know anybody. The first time I actually met Zan, and I had been, corresponding with him about stuff. It was in 2017 at San Diego. And it's probably mostly because I was an East Coast guy. And, I would just go to New York and some of the shows in the East Coast, and I never made it over to the West Side. And now I'm in Seattle. So I'm ready to go to West Coast shows, and
now they're all canceled. No,
Isn't
it's
that fun?
true though. Because I'm from Washington D.C., so I grew up on the East Coast. So I totally get it. There were like little expos here and there, but not a lot of huge conventions. At least not back in the '90s,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
or early 2000s. Um,
There was
I'm
no small press expo, I don't think, that far back. I mean, now, I mean, and for a while, it's been pretty good for that. But yeah,
Yeah, Small Press Expo. I remember I did Small Press Expo a couple of times, and that was, I think the first time I did that was maybe 2003, 2002
yeah.
or
So
2003. I moved to California in 2004. Um, and as soon as I moved to California, like all of the connections started to happen as far as queer comics. Going to San Diego every year, going up to WonderCon when it was in San Francisco before it moved down to LA, going up to Ape, which was up in the San Francisco area. Um, just getting to know all of those queer creators is great.
yeah, it's a great community for sure. Um, did you ever? So you were in DC. Did you ever, when you were getting comics there, Big Planet? Were they around when you were
Yep,
getting books? Okay.
yep. I went to Big Planet.
I love Big Planet. Every time I would go to DC, and I would go to the one outside of the city, I would go to the one in Fairfax.
Okay.
But man, what a great store! What a just like I went to this comic shop in Orlando called A Comic Shop, and they're great community, but not as big on the indie books. And then I would go to Big Planet, and I was going to DC like every month or something for work, and every time I'm just loaded up with all these amazing zines and local books and all this stuff. I mean, oh, such a treasure.
It's so funny how our paths have kind of like crossed here and there a couple of times.
Yeah, it's weird. This is the way the way it works, and you compare notes. So comics. You've done a lot of different things. I mean, you've colored, you've written, you've drawn. I'm sure you've inked as part of that. What was it like editing? Because I saw that you edited Theater of Terror with Justin for Northwest. What was it like taking on that role?
Yeah, that was the first time that I had really edited other people's work. I edit my work a lot, but that was really an interesting project to work on. It was a lot of fun, first of all, but Justin Hall really kind of took me under his wing because he's done a lot of editing, and also teaches comic making and cartooning. Um, and so he invited me. He knew that the book would be horror themed, and wanted someone that was a little more into horror to also be aboard this project. So he invited me on, and I was like, hell yeah, horror is my thing. So then we started the selection process, contacting creators who we wanted to be a part of this anthology, or some of the creators contacted us, and we were like, yeah, you love your work, like hop on. Um, so it was an interesting process. Like I said earlier, I'm not a very social person. I tend to work a lot on my own, and so I think the what was really new as far as the editing process for me was being much more social and vocal with people. Usually, if I'm creating my own work, I'm working on my own, or if I'm doing work for someone else, then they'll tell me what they want. Like if they want colors, they'll tell me particular colors that they want or whatever, some direction, and then I go off and do it on my own still. But being an editor, I have to be the proactive person to make contact with people, make sure people are keeping deadlines, and give feedback if any is needed for creators working on stuff. And so that kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone in a good way.
Yeah.
And probably has helped me a lot, and along with the Cinephilia show too, and being more social and active in the community as well. So I love that Justin invited me on to do it. It was a lot of fun. I would love to do it again.
I think you did a great job. I mean, between you and Justin and all the creators involved, it's a great work. I love this page. So this is from a piece that you wrote and illustrated,
Hmm.
and this demon bear is a great like kind of archetype, sort of, kind of like his monster under the bed, so to speak.
Yeah.
But in a weird way, and I mean, admittedly, I'm into bears. You know, it's a thing. And you know, I am also bear identify. You know, so it's a little bit of both, right? You drew a sexy kind of beast here. Like, you know, I wouldn't say that maybe that's like the obvious thing, but there's just certain moments that are both horrific and also like kind of not titillating is the wrong word, but there's just like this undercurrent of something that I really like.
Yeah, that's what we were kind of going for with the whole book. We wanted to make sure that um, all of the stories were told from a point of view that were comfortable for the creators. So if they wanted to, because it's all about being queer and being open and all of that kind of stuff. So if you wanted to include some sort of sexuality with it or something that was titillating, by all means, like it should be there because that's a part of who we are as people, as queer people. And for me, I've always found monsters to be um, kind of hot and scary at the same time. Like that's my experience. I part of horror movies for me is the excitement in various ways. So
I'm learning so much more about your aesthetic now. So this story, I believe, was this was your illustration, and was it Dave wrote it?
no, the opposite. I wrote it and
Oh,
Dave drew it.
oh, that's right. Because yeah, I was like, wait a minute. Um,
That's
I
totally
think
his style, his gorgeous style. I love his work.
yeah, no, I mean you both are really talented, and it's kind of cool that you know you work together well, and that doesn't always work with boyfriends, as I have learned in the past. Uh, but yeah, this story is really cool too because again, it combines the sexy, sexual sort of picking up somebody at a bar or you know I think online or and then at a bar, and then things happen that are horrific, and it's a delicate thing to balance. I'm guessing between the two colors or between the two tones to try to like strike that balance.
Yeah, this is one. So, in creating Theater of Terror, like I said, Justin invited me to be an editor at some point along the line. But before that, Justin was already working on the book and had invited Dave and I to do the story. So we actually started working on this story before I found out I was going to be an editor on the book. We were just going to have the story in it. And at that point, I know Justin wanted to have a very wide range of horror genres within the book. So there's some slasher type stuff. There's some vampire stuff. He specifically wanted me to write something that was more of a psychological thriller. And so the first thing that I thought of was I wanted to do a story that was about a culture vulture, a character who is stealing and appropriating someone else's culture. And so it became this story about this white guy who goes out on a date with a black guy and ends up sort of appropriating in a very creepy way. And of course, I'm black, Dave's white. So we had a lot of discussion about how we could portray this and how this could be, what would actually make this work, and what is appropriation, what isn't appropriation, and that kind of thing. So it was a very nice collaborative effort, and I love the way that he interpreted my words into the art. I think it's another one that's very creepy, but at the same time very sexy. So
There's some fantastic dialogue in this too. I don't want to spoil the ending because I do think that it's a great reveal. And that one of the things I want to mention is a line from it that I can't even say the line because I think it spoils it a little bit, but it's certainly something you may hear if one is topping the other person.
well, a lot of the things that the character's saying that are things that I've heard people. I mean, it's yeah. There's a lot of truth in that story. It came from a true place.
Yeah, and I definitely I got a sense for that too when the white character is sort of like I'm assuming, and I've never had this happen to me, in my experience, having someone sort of comment on like my physical features in a way that I felt was creepy and appropriating, kind of sort of. But I can totally see that coming through the story from your perspective, like
I definitely have had that numerous times.
being fetishized. I can't even say the word. In that way, can, I'm sure, be creepy. Yeah. So I mean, I guess the closest I could think of is someone who comes up and starts stroking my beard, and it's like, okay, hold on here. First of all, consent much?
Yeah, don't ever touch the hair without consent first. Like, do not. I mean, a lot of people I might consent to ask, but yeah, you don't just that's definitely a pet peeve.
It's such a thing now to be mindful of, but I will tell you, and I'm 43, my first experiences at bear and leather bars, 100% not consensual people coming up doing this, doing that. And I know people older than myself, they have a hard time dealing with that and still figuring this out. And it only takes a couple intense moments of teaching moments to correct that, at least in theory. But man, it is still a struggle for some of these guys.
Yeah, it is. And of course, like atmosphere is a thing. Like, I know how the bars are, and I know how a lot of these communities are, but I think that having consent just makes things a little freer. Like, it makes everyone feel more comfortable, and then you don't have to worry about that kind of thing.
It's like people having a hard time dealing with pronouns who just go, well, I just assume, it's like, it's weird at first. You don't necessarily instinctively think of it, but once you do it a few times, once you just work through that, it's like, oh yeah, obviously this makes a lot more sense, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have not only done a lot of cool creator and sort of independent stuff, you have also been very vocal about film. And I, again, didn't realize this until fairly recently. You have a show that you're a part of, Cinephilia, with Art Vega, I believe,
Art
right?
Vega.
And that's on the Perception Studio. Their Perception Studios does like what, Twitch-based stream shows?
Yeah, so they have a channel on Twitch, which their channel started with actually doing D&D shows. They play Dungeons and Dragons, but they play them with puppets, or puppets is the wrong word. With the Perception Studio word is filtered friends. They find puppets to be derogatory. Oh. So, I mean, it's a fun joke type thing.
Yeah.
But so they actually do D&D shows live with Filtered Friends, which is a riot if you ever get a chance to watch that. But when they started to expand, they invited me to, because I was already friends with these guys, they invited me to come talk about film, because they know that that's where my heart is. That's, my brain thinks in film. That's how I work. So yeah, I was happy to start that show with them.
So I got to listen to a little bit or watch a little bit of it before this stream started. And yeah, it's great. You guys did a deep dive on the witches and the works of Robert Zemeckis. Really more about Zemeckis than the witches.
Yeah, the witches was kind of like a driving force to begin it, but then we went more into his work as a whole.
I was like doing too many other things, but I was like so ready to chat in. They were like, "Wait a minute, talk about this. You didn't talk about this." But you guys really covered a lot of it. It was a really good comprehensive sort of look at Zemeckis. And it's funny because you brought up things about Zemeckis that I had forgotten, show or movies that he had done that I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right, Zemeckis did that." That I may or may not have even seen, like Polar Express. I never watched that one. So, go figure. But what got you? So you think in film, I forgot. Have you done like some film work, or is it just something you kind of are passionate about?
No, I originally wanted to get into film as a kid. So when I went to college, that was that's what I was studying. I was studying visual communications, but with a very hard slant to film. So my major is in visual communications, and then my minor is in critical cinema. Like I just wanted everything to be about film. So I don't know. That's just how my brain has always worked since I was little. Like when I see things in my head, I see them in camera angles and in large sweeps and dolly moves and stuff like that. It's probably from watching lots of television as a kid or lots of film as a kid. Like I remember my my mobile when I was a kid and or when I was a baby, the mobile above my crib was just Disney characters floating around.
Really?
And so I grew up on Disney and then, segued into everything else. Disney is actually hard to believe, but Disney is actually why I'm so into horror now. And Disney is what got me initially into horror because my favorite parts of the Disney movies are the Disney villains. They were always the most interesting. And so, following that, when you start to watch live action movies, all the most interesting characters are villains and crazy and out there. And probably also because for a long time the villains were queer coded, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was seeing in villains the queerness that I was, that the heroes are boring.
Isn't it funny? And it's a great observation that yeah, Disney films and other types of media like that, the queer characters that we relate to were the villains or the sidekicks sometimes, or the fairy godmother, no pun intended. Like it was always the ancillary characters or the sort of foils. It was never the main characters. That was so obviously the heteronormative,
Right.
boring, white, cisgender. I mean, all of that usually, but like just yeah, it was never my thing either. I actually, Yzma is my favorite Disney villain.
Anything Eartha Kitt is my favorite.
100%, right? And it's one of those Disney movies. A lot of people, Emperor's New Groove, they just completely overlooked because it was in a weird time for Disney. I think it was right before the one with Roseanne as a cow.
Oh yeah, Home on the Range.
Home on the Range. It was like in that weird between period. But anyway, so yeah, I totally understand what you mean by Disney. So what in terms of film though, like what if you had to pick a filmmaker? I mean, you said you're into horror. Like tell me a little bit about your style or who you see out there doing the thing that you really resonate with.
Well, right now, since someone has finally gotten a chance, Jordan Peele is really doing some great work. I love horror movies with some sort of social commentary, which obviously his work is doing. I really love Guillermo del Toro. His work is amazing visually, but also story-wise. He's full of social commentary as well. I love outside of horror. I mean, I love horror, but I love a lot of stuff outside of horror as well. Really excited to see anything that Barry Jenkins does after Moonlight. Moonlight,
yes,
was such a revelation for me. Like being such a huge film person and having watched movies night and day for my entire life. I've seen a lot of movies. Like I've seen a lot. But Moonlight, which just came out in 2016, not that long ago, was the first time that I actually felt like I saw myself on the screen.
Wow.
And that's such a major thing. I feel like, everyone should be able to see themselves on screen. Representation, it's so cliche to say at this point, representation matters, but it's true.
Yeah.
Like if you are able to see yourself in, a movie or a TV show, then your existence is validated. Even more so if you're able to see yourself positively or as a positive lead in a movie or TV show. It's very different than associating yourself with one of the Disney villains, Because for the longest time I was like, who am I? Am I like a Maleficent? Am I a Catwoman? No, I'm Sharon from Moonlight. That's literally who I am, and it's just amazing to be able to say that.
I feel like as a white cisgendered man, it's like obviously I saw myself in so many things, but it really was when I saw little glimpses of gay characters in my my childhood in TV in the 90s and 80s, little bits here and there that really like, oh my God, that's me. Like that was those. And looking back, especially thinking about like, you familiar with Matt Baum out of Seattle, his Gay Culture Cruise series? I'll have to send you.
Yes.
Yeah. fantastic because it's mining all of that era for queer representation and some stuff like, oh yeah, obviously, if you know TV at all, like Maude, and All in the Family, and the Jeffersons having a trans character, but like, even weirder things that people might have forgotten about. Seeing that and going, yeah, that's right. So like representation for anybody is important. Um, so yeah, I'm thrilled that Moonlight was that for you. What do you in terms of like the stuff that's out now and movies we talked about? Have you been watching like Lovecraft Country? Is that something you're finding to be good and good for representation? And
Oh, I love Lovecraft Country. It's nice to just see Black people able to lead genre. Like it's just something that you don't think of a lot if you're not Black. Obviously, if you're Black, it's on your head all the time. It's in your mind all the time. But I think most audiences don't think, oh, we can tell this story, and it could be a Black lead, and that can just be it. I feel like a lot of shows, and Lovecraft Country does come under this a little bit, or a lot, because it's a part of the storyline. But I feel like a lot of shows and movies feel that if they tell a Black story, it has to be related to gangsters or slavery or Civil War, or civil rights, and all that stuff is important. But we can also be, we can be in monster movies, we can be in science fiction, we can be in all of this other stuff that Lovecraft Country and a bunch of other shows and movies are presenting now. Black leads in horror movies are wonderful. Like, and they aren't new. There are new ones, but Blacks have always been in this kind of work. It's just that audiences aren't receptive to them. So they end up just becoming, you have that Black cinema section in the movie in the video store. And as a kid, I always hated that section.
yeah,
Because as a kid, I would look at those movies and go, okay, but this is a drama and this is a horror, and this is, why are these movies not, in those sections? As an adult, I understand we have a Black cinema section because this is the representation that we need. This is what we need to see, because those other genres are just so oversaturated with cis white men, and the like. So yeah, it's been a very interesting trajectory to come upon that realization that Black cinema isn't an important thing, but I would love for all audiences to be able to see themselves in all people. Like, it's not that hard.
no, I think you're right. I think it's finally getting really wide acceptance and the snowball effect that you see in Hollywood, where one studio is doing it, well now the other studio is going to do it, and it ripples out. I have a random Black cinema thing though I have to run by you. So do you or do you not like the works of Rudy Ray Moore?
Yeah, I do.
I've only recently discovered his stuff, and I think I have an obsession with Petey Wheatstraw. And the movie, and I can't remember what was the biopic they made with oh crap, with yeah, who played him? Man, it's been a while.
Are you Dolomite?
Yes, my name is Dolomite. Yes, I
There's definitely, like, blaxploitation is definitely a thing. Like, I'm not going to knock it. It has its pros and its cons, but it's like a stepping stone. Like, before you get if you're not getting any representation, then you want some representation. It might
Sure.
not be the best representation, but at least you're getting something. And then from that, you move on to something that is, more positive. It's just like the documentary on Netflix, Disclosure. They
Yes.
talk a lot about trans representation and how trans representation, for a long time and still ongoing, unfortunately, trans people in media are just portrayed as monsters or sinful or just awful things.
Yep.
And as young trans people, they talk about in that documentary how even though they weren't the best representations, at least they were seeing themselves in some way. At least they were being included. And then you move on once that becomes old hat. You move on to something new, and you start to push, media into the direction that it needs to go. It's the same thing with any queer representation, any Black representation. There has definitely been decades of awful Black representation. I can still pick out things that I enjoy in those representations. It doesn't mean that it's perfect, but also like I now have some good representation, so I can talk about that stuff more.
No, for sure. It's good to see that it's an evolution, right?
Yes, exactly. That's the word.
But finding those parts of the sort of ancient history that you can enjoy and appreciate is always something I've loved, and seeing in cinema. I'm talking more in cinema side than Black representation, but like bad movies that were earnestly made, sort of like, I guess you could even say The Room is a great example of this.
Yeah.
So even seeing like Rudy Ray Moore's stuff as that, to me, is interesting, but clearly in certain ways like not being great in terms of representation, but it's yeah.
But like I said, there's a pro and con, and that's exactly what the pro is. That, I mean, even though the movies might not be the best made, or they might have some stereotypes that aren't exactly positive, still we're getting a Black person actually being able to create and dictate their own work.
Yes.
And so I will far take a awful stereotype that is part of a Black person expressing themselves. I would take that any day over an awful stereotype that a white person has put into their movie, because their Black expression, is a valuable thing that doesn't get to be expressed that often. I feel like, I don't know what I was going to say next.
Well, I was going to say so you have a Patreon, right? That I actually just signed up for, so I could do a deep dive on some of your stuff. Yeah, I love supporting people I know and people I follow, and if they have like especially when they have a really inexpensive, like, I think I did the $1 a month one. Like, everybody should do this. If you have anybody you follow and they have a Patreon and they have an inexpensive option for you to get their content, not only are you helping them, but you get some cool stuff, and it's a little community to be a part of. But you do this series called Whitewashed in this Cinephilia webcomic that you have, and it's really good. It's powerful because you go through and really talk about cultural appropriation and characters, specifically, actors who come in and whitewash or whatever wash or basically take that ethnicity, take that part away from someone who is that and could play that. And you talk to one of my favorite examples, because I was completely wrong when I first saw Ghost in the Shell and ScarJo. And I was like, no, but it's okay because she's a android or she's a cyborg, and the Japanese audiences love the fact that it's blah, blah, blah. So I was defending this back, what was this, like 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah.
And then I had a friend of mine who was on Flame On, Oral, and he is a delightful queer Black man that I love and adore. And he had to set me straight. And it was a great learning moment for me because I just didn't have the perspective. But your series, it's like, what is it, like a 13-part, like, different, like that. It's great. It's very powerful. I mean, is that only in the Patreon, or did you put that up somewhere, or is that collected, or?
I think that story is only on Patreon at this point. It was on Tumblr when Tumblr was a big deal. And then the exodus from Tumblr happened, and I think all of my Cinephilia stuff is just on Patreon now. But so Cinephilia actually started as a webcomic first, and then the webcomic is what got the guys at Perception Studio to invite me to do the show based on the webcomic. But yeah, Whitewashed is whitewashing is one of my big pet peeves in cinema. Like, I mean, I have a lot of them, but that's one of the biggest ones just because it is so um, insidious. It just continuously keeps happening, no matter how much you call it out. It still is just happening. And so I actually had to start that comic by just like literally stepping up onto a soapbox and be like, we need to have this conversation. This is just a conversation that needs to happen. And then the 13 pages of me just yelling with whitewashed characters from cinema.
No, but it's the reason I think at some point you should collect it or do something outside of Patreon is I think it's a really good way to distill it down and give examples in a creative and fun medium. Like, the beauty of something like that, or like Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, or whatever, thing you're talking about, where the author is present on a soapbox or whatever, and sort of just walking you through something. It's always, I think, a really great medium and a way to express those topics, and you just do a great job with it. So
thank you. Yeah, I've been thinking about collecting some of the Cinephilia stuff, so that's something I should
Kickstarter time. When you get ready to launch the Kickstarter for it, let me know. We'll get you back on. So Cinephilia is going really well, it looks like. I mean, you guys got a great vibe between you and Art. That's weekly on Mondays, right? Like basically we had to figure out how to schedule this because your normal time is like overlap with my normal time.
Yeah.
Which is like Monday's a popular day to do shows. What are you going to do?
It seems to be, and everyone has like a podcast and a show these days since we're all sitting at home.
Honestly.
But yeah, I literally jumped right off of that onto here, back to back. But yeah,
I do it
at 5:30. We do that Pacific time.
It's interesting too when you're doing it on the Pacific time, but you're also trying to keep it accessible for East Coast people, which again, and you can relate, thinking East Coast, it probably took you like a while to get your brain to sort of move past and now think West Coast time. And it's been a struggle for me.
For me, like the early evening is like morning for me because I tend to stay up all night and work at night and do stuff at night, sleep in the morning. So it's
so you're completely shifted over.
My time is fucked up no matter what time zone I'm in.
You're on Japan time is what you're on, man.
Pretty much.
When I was over there, I would have to like overlap with my boyfriend by some like I would be getting off work as I think he was getting up or go. I don't even remember now. It was so backwards, and time zones are crazy. So what do you have coming up? Are you just, kind of doing Cinephilia and that part of your Patreon, or do you have something you're working on to like put out in the world? What are you doing?
Well, in addition to Cinephilia, Dave and I we enjoy collaborating a lot. So we're actually working on putting another book together where we're each doing stories, but it's kind of a collaborative effort. He is much further along in that process than I am. I think he's got 2 stories that are pretty much ready to go. And I still have some work to do on that. But that is something that is coming up. We love working together. So it's, I think for this first issue, we're each doing our own stories, but at some point we're going to switch off again where he writes and I draw and I write and he draws and do some collaborative stuff like that. And then also both of us have talked about getting more into animation. And so that first book, The Goth Queen, that I talked about earlier, I've been reimagining that, but told from the point of view of those queer gargoyles that are in the margins in the original. I want to retell that story from their point of view so that they're more of the focus and the lead. And I've been seriously toying with the idea of doing that in animation, turning that into an animated short. So that would be fun and time consuming.
Oh my gosh. Everyone who I know who does animation, it's insane. And even with modern technology and tools to help, it's still so much work.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'm also getting more into traditional painting. Like I do a lot of ink wash and watercolor work that's not necessarily comic or cartooning related, just portrait work and stuff like that. So I've been keeping busy.
Well, that's good though. I mean, this is the thing. People don't love not being able to go out and have adventures in the world because you need that too. But man, you can't help for like productivity time when you're just stuck at home and you're like, I got to do something.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I actually been seeing these the watercolors you're talking about come up. Some of them are pretty darn creepy. I'm like I'm horror adjacent. I like the schlocky horror, but I think there's a moment where I don't. It's just too much for me. Like I can handle like a light ghost story, like you were talking about the Haunting of Bly Manor. I love it. It's great. It's just creepy enough.
yeah.
But you go past that and you get to like the Ring or some of the other more intense stuff,
Is
and
the
I'm
ring too much for you? I
uh,
love
I
the ring.
I don't know why, and it's weird. This is ridiculous. The Ring, the original one, which is it was it the Grudge, right? Is it that's
And
the
the original
basis?
was Ringu, and then the
Ringu.
good was Juon.
Okay, yeah. So they're like, but I saw I think the original the Japanese one first, and it was freaky enough because there's some Japanese cinema things that they're just different enough from a Western, like so your brain's already kind of in a weird space. But then yeah, the American version, and then I watched the porn version, which I don't know if you've heard of The Hole.
I have not seen the whole,
Let
but
me tell you, it's amazing.
I will say that one of my favorite porn movies. I can't believe I'm saying this. Uh, One of my favorite porn movies is Moan, which is the gay porn spoof of Scream.
Oh, I need to find that. I don't think
Yeah.
I've seen that. So like you're probably like me. Like the sex is fine, that's whatever. But it's really the fact that they try to fit it in with a story.
Yes, my favorite are ones that do stories, and then because it's porn, you're not going to like take the story seriously to begin with. If it's like a spoof of another movie, that's just all the better.
So you're gonna love The Hole. I will figure out a way if it's not available somewhere. It's TLA. It came out in like the early 2000s. Pretty much right after The Ring had been a thing. And all I'm gonna say is there's a music number in it.
Oh no!
Yes, it's
Is
a
that a
music.
plus or a minus? Is that a good thing?
Yes, it's a music montage, and it's just fantastic. It's so good.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm going to send you a link to it somehow if I can figure out how to do that. Oh, wow! I just have one more thing I wanted to talk to you before we wrap up, and I can't think of what it is. Oh, but we had a great segue into the porn conversation, and then gone.
Yeah, where is he going to segue to from here?
Yeah, I got nothing. No, well, thank you for sitting down and talking to me. I really like I said, I really like your stuff. I actually need to get Dave on now. Now that I've talked to you, I feel like I really have to talk to him. Which it's a great problem to have. More exciting guests to come on and talk queer comics. But yeah, no, I look forward to seeing more of. Oh, I know what it was. I look forward to seeing more of your work on Patreon, of course. Which if you want to find out more of your stuff, including Patreon. There's the link, www.williamotyler.com.
Yep, everything is there. Linkable.
And direct link because, Cinephilia is a cool little Twitch show. And I've been doing more Twitch. This actually is streaming on my Twitch channel, Curling Bear. So yeah, if you want, people can go check out that Twitch TV.com/Perception Studio. And I think, wasn't one of the other shows like Roll for Initiative?
Yep.
Is that? I've heard of that one. So when I was looking at the different shows, I was like, oh, I know that one. And then, I really appreciate.
A couple of times, so that might be why you heard of it. I was posting about it.
Oh, really? That's probably that, and no, I think some other people I know follow it, and so like D&D. I'm from this nerdy show community back in Orlando, and the D&D show idea, like different things, like even like Drag Queens of Adventure, like a lot of people are playing with that as a great storytelling thing. If you guys want to, if any of our viewers out there and listeners, this will be a podcast as well here in basically a few months, the way we're going. We have a backlog. If you have any things or questions about, you want to send to William, please do. And again, when you have your new projects ready to come out, I'd love to have you back on, and you and Dave can come and talk more, because I'm excited. This is great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Take care.
Bye.